Imagine buying a brand new iPhone for $1,000, but $400 of that price tag went straight into shipping costs. That wasn't a hypothetical nightmare. Before 1956, that was reality. Moving goods across oceans was so slow, corrupt, and absurdly expensive that global trade barely existed. Today, over 90% of everything you own, from the shirt on your back to the screen in your hands, traveled inside a plain, boring, rust-covered steel box. If those boxes stopped moving for just 7 days, the entire global economy would crash into a dark age. So how did one impatient truck driver, a mob-infested dock system, and a military crisis in Vietnam create the most powerful economic engine in human history? Let's dive in. In the 1950s, international shipping wasn't a sleek global industry. It was a localized crime scene. It was called breakbulk shipping, and it was painfully, agonizingly slow. A cargo ship could spend up to 2/3 of its total lifespan doing absolutely nothing, just sitting tied up in a harbor while hundreds of dock workers manually hoisted single crates, loose barrels, and heavy sacks into the ship's dark lower hold. Because every single item was handled individually by human hands, disaster was guaranteed. Cargo was constantly smashed. Theft was rampant. In fact, cargo theft on New York piers was so systemic that port authorities assumed up to 20% of all incoming goods would simply vanish into thin air. The result? Shipping a product across the ocean consumed up to 50% of its final value. Importing coffee, electronics, or clothes made almost zero financial sense unless you were selling luxury items to the ultra-wealthy. The modern globalized world literally could not exist. Enter Malcolm McLean. Malcolm wasn't an ocean strategist. He wasn't a maritime billionaire. He was just a humble truck driver from North Carolina who built a small fleet of delivery rigs. One afternoon in 1937, McLean sat parked at a port in New Jersey for 8 straight hours, watching workers slowly unload his truck box by wooden box. Sitting in his cab, he had a radical, blindingly simple thought. Why are we spending hundreds of hours unloading the truck when we could just detach the entire metal trailer and drop it straight onto the ship? He pitched the idea to maritime experts. They laughed in his face. Shipping moguls called him insane. To them, ships were built for deep holds and custom cargo, not rigid, heavy metal boxes. Malcolm didn't care. In 1955, he risked everything. He sold his entire multi-million-dollar trucking company, took out a massive bank loan, and bought a converted World War II oil tanker called the Ideal X. He custom-built 58 steel boxes and designed cranes capable of lifting them directly from truck beds onto the ship. On April 26, 1956, the Ideal X set sail from Newark to Houston. The shipping establishment was waiting for him to fail. Instead, Malcolm blew the entire industry wide open. Malcolm's success triggered instant panic. Dock worker unions and organized crime syndicates realized that if one crane operator could do the work of 100 men in a fraction of the time, their entire corrupt empire was doomed. For nearly a decade, powerful labor unions shut down ports, launched strikes, and bribed officials to block container ships from docking. The box was stalled in a bitter economic war. Until 1965. Enter the Vietnam War. The U.S. military was fighting a massive war in Southeast Asia, but their supply line was a catastrophic disaster. Ships were sitting stuck off the coast of Saigon for months because traditional ports couldn't unload ammo, food, and medical supplies fast enough. Desperate, the Pentagon called Malcolm McLean. He brought his container ships to Cam Ranh Bay, built specialized port cranes overnight, and fixed the U.S. military's entire logistics bottleneck in weeks. Then Malcolm made one final, legendary masterstroke. To ensure every country and company could use the system, he gave away his container design patents completely free. He forced the international community to adopt standard dimensions, 20-foot and 40-foot steel boxes, the birth of the global TEU standard. Once the world standardized the box, the economic floodgates didn't just open, they ruptured. In 1956, loading a ton of loose cargo onto a ship cost $5.86. After containerization, that exact same ton cost just 16 cents. That is a 97% cost reduction. Before the container, it was financial suicide to make something on one side of the planet and sell it on the other. Now, shipping became so cheap that it was practically free. This single innovation gave birth to modern globalization. Western corporations realized they could offshore manufacturing to Asia, pay lower production costs, and transport finished goods back to North America or Europe for pennies on the dollar. It transformed China into an economic superpower and birthed just-in-time manufacturing. Suddenly, companies didn't need huge, expensive warehouses. The ocean was the warehouse, with millions of steel boxes acting as an invisible, floating assembly line. Today, there are over 20 million shipping containers constantly crisscrossing the blue oceans of our planet. They move silently, efficiently, and completely ignored by the billions of people who rely on them every single day. The steel box created the hyper-connected, dirt-cheap world we take for granted today. But it also created an intensely fragile web, where a single disruption at one port thousands of miles away can instantly leave your local store shelves empty. It turns out our modern world wasn't built by politicians or tech gurus. It was built by a trucker with a bold idea and a 30-cent piece of corrugated steel. If you want to unlock the hidden economic mechanics running our world, hit that subscribe button for Fabby, and drop a comment below on what hidden business story we should uncover next. Thanks for watching.